Just imagine, for a second, a world where you have a practically unlimited supply of genius-level thinking, available on demand, 24/7. That's a pretty wild idea from Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei. And, we're not just talking about smarter computers here. We're talking about a complete rewrite of the most valuable resource in our entire economy, cognitive work. So what would genius on demand actually look like for our jobs, for our wages, for society? Well, to try and get our heads around that, we're going to explore a couple of really fascinating economic models that are trying to map out this radical new future. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start small with a simple model of how knowledge work creates value inside a single company. Then we'll introduce our AI geniuses and see how they just completely shake things up. And finally, we'll zoom way out to look at the big picture, the consequences for the entire economy, and really the very meaning of work itself. Okay, so before we can get into AI's impact, we first need a simple way to think about how we create value. And there's a really useful economic model that splits all knowledge work into two fundamental types. There's this fantastic story about the mathematician John von Neumann that just perfectly captures this. He was given this classic puzzle about a fly buzzing between two trains that are about to crash. Now, most people solve it with a clever little trick, but not von Neumann. When they asked him how he got the answer so fast, he just said, "What trick? All I did was sum the infinite series." In his head. Instantly. And that right there, that's the core difference we're about to dig into. So first up, you have what the model calls a routine worker. Now, this isn't about boring or low-skill work at all. Think of a top surgeon performing a standard operation. They're absolute experts at applying existing knowledge. But the further a problem gets from the established playbook, the less valuable their expertise becomes. It's kind of like walking away from a lamp in a dark room. For every step you take, the light gets a little dimmer until eventually you're just too far away to see anything at all. And then you have the genius worker, our John von Neumann. These folks don't just use the map, they're the ones drawing new parts of it. They can tackle pretty much any problem, no matter how new. But, and this is a big but, the effort required from them grows like crazy. So if a slightly new problem takes, say, 2 units of effort, a very new one might take 4, and a completely novel one could take 16. The cost of pure invention gets really high really fast. So this sets up the fundamental tension of the entire knowledge economy, right? You have a pretty big supply of routine experts who are fantastic at solving known problems. But you have a very, very scarce supply of geniuses who are the only ones who can push the boundaries. So for all of modern history, the name of the game has been about how you allocate that precious, scarce genius talent to the right problems. So what happens when this whole carefully balanced system gets a massive shock? What happens when that one super scarce resource, genius, suddenly becomes abundant, all thanks to AI? Well, the impact doesn't happen all at once. It seems to unfold in stages. Before AI, human geniuses are working on the really tough problems. In the short run, AI kind of takes over the middle ground, which pushes the human experts to the absolute bleeding edge of knowledge. But in the long run, the model predicts something a lot more dramatic: the complete displacement of an entire class of worker. So in that first phase, the human geniuses don't just disappear. They hyper-specialize. They get pushed out to the problems that are the most unknown, the problems where their human intuition still gives them an edge. The AI geniuses fill in that middle gap, and for a little while, routine work just kind of carries on as it always has. But that stability doesn't last. The long-run conclusion of this model is pretty stark. If an AI genius can perform any task a routine worker can, and do it more efficiently, then eventually that routine knowledge work gets entirely automated. The economic logic is just inescapable. Okay, so now let's zoom out. What happens when this logic scales up from just one company to the entire global economy? Well, the implications get even bigger, and frankly, the stakes get much, much higher. And this is the big question, isn't it? If AI can do everything from writing software to doing scientific research to driving a truck, what does that mean for economic growth and our role in it? To answer that, we need a new way of looking at things. To get there, we need to make a new distinction. First, there's something called bottleneck work. These are the jobs and tasks that are absolutely essential for economic growth. I mean, think about it. You literally cannot grow an economy without more energy, or better science, or more efficient logistics. These are the absolute non-negotiables. And then, on the other hand, you have accessory work. These are tasks that are valuable, sure, but they aren't required for growth. The economy can get bigger and bigger forever, even if we never get another artisan baker or a gourmet chef. They make life way better, but they aren't holding back GDP. So, you can think of it like this. Bottleneck work is the engine of the economy: energy, science, logistics. Accessory work is more like hospitality and the arts, all the things that make the ride more enjoyable. And this distinction, well, it's the key to understanding everything that comes next. And here is the main takeaway. The relentless, unstoppable drive for economic growth creates this incredible incentive to automate any and all bottleneck work. If a human job is holding back the entire economy, you can bet that AGI is going to be aimed right at it, because the payoff for removing that bottleneck is just astronomical. Okay, so if AGI automates all the essential, growth-driving work, what's left for us? And maybe more importantly, how does this change the value of our labor and what we can actually earn? In this new AI economy, the rules of the game just completely change. Growth is no longer driven by human labor, it's driven by raw computing power. And this means your wage isn't tied to your value anymore. It's tied to how cheaply an AI could replace you. And the truly staggering result is that even as the economy grows to unbelievable sizes, human wages could just flatline, with almost all of that new wealth flowing to whoever owns the compute. And this leads us to the model's most jarring conclusion of all. If wealth and income always flow to whatever's creating growth, and if humans are no longer the drivers of that growth, what share of the total economic pie will go to human labor? In the long run, this model predicts that share converges to zero. All the value is captured by the capital that's doing the actual work, the computers. Look, this isn't just an economic shift, it's a deeply societal one. It forces us to ask some really fundamental questions about what work is even for, and where we as people find our value. This quote from one of the economists who wrote the paper really captures the bleak reality of this model. It's not that humans will have nothing to do. We can still create art or cook amazing food or do all sorts of things, but our labor would no longer be economically essential. If half the human workforce just vanished overnight, the AGI-powered economy wouldn't even skip a beat. And that leaves us with the ultimate question to chew on. For centuries, our purpose and our meaning have been so deeply tied to our economic contributions, to being a necessary cog in the great machine of progress. In a world where that might not be true anymore, how do we redefine our value? What is the purpose of our work when it's no longer a bottleneck to prosperity? And that really is the challenge these models place squarely in front of all of us.